and welcome to another episode of Adventures in Messaging. I'm Emma Stratton, and today I'm so excited to be joined by Christine Sotelo, Group PMM at Intercom. Hey, Christine.
Hi, Emma.
It is so good to have you on the show. Really excited because I am a real fan of the Intercom brand. Intercom messaging. I've worked with many clients who have called out Intercom as the brand they admire and like, oh, could we say it how Intercom talks about customer data here? So it's super cool to have you on the show today. Since Intercom's messaging is so good, I mean, tell me, how do you do it? How do you approach messaging there? How do you make it so good?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me, and thank you for all the compliments as well. I think our approach to messaging, it's definitely evolved. I mean, I've been at Intercom for almost 6 years, so it's definitely evolved in that time. Where we kind of start with our messaging or where we think about it is the foundation is empathy, right? Truly, really understanding customers or potential customers and the pain that they're facing, and through that the problem that your solution is solving for them. The trap, or the easy trap to fall into with positioning and messaging, is talking about functionality, and there's not that emotive hook that's going to kind of bring people in. So rooting things in that empathy layer really helps. And then the other side that we constantly check ourselves against is this how people talk, right? Is this our vernacular? Are we using words that people use in their everyday lives? So, I think those two things are pretty solid pillars around great messaging.
Yeah, I love that. Start with empathy. Maybe we should put that on a t-shirt. It's like, that is where it belongs. So when you're working, because I know you manage a team of people who are creating messaging for all sorts of things, how do you get them to empathize? How do you start with empathy? Do you have any kind of techniques or things, best practices there?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. There's two parts to this too. One part is just talking to our existing customers, listening to what the problems that we've solved for them and how they've seen success there. And so that's kind of, understanding where people kind of want to end up when they use our solution. And the other part of that is talking to those who are not yet Intercom customers, who are using other solutions or nothing, what they're experiencing, and mirroring those two and using that as the foundation. Then we plug it into a messaging framework, which probably most people have, but it starts with pain, value, differentiator, but without those two pieces of really truly understanding the customer and truly understanding our prospects, it's too much guessing.
Yes. No, I love that you really look at not just existing customers, but prospects. Do you find there's often a wide gap between the two in your experience, or is it pretty easy to find themes? How do you kind of see those two different customer sets, if you will?
Yeah, you know what? The themes or the pain points typically are pretty similar, right?
Mhm.
There might be different ways of framing it, but it's still pretty similar pain points. I think where we see the gaps or where we see the disconnect in messaging is that customers are so used to us talking to them that they're happy to regurgitate what we tell them. We're just getting this, confirmation cycle of like, oh yeah, it does resonate. And we'll put that same messaging in front of prospects. And we don't know what you mean by this word or this, that's where we see the biggest disconnect, and when it really helps to kind of test messaging across, all parties.
Yeah, no, that is super interesting because I know about the own internal echo chamber that can happen within a marketing team, for example, or an organization where we make up our own words. It sounds normal to us, and then you say it to the customer and they scratch their heads. But I guess Intercom being a large company and having this customer base where now the customers are part of that echo chamber, so now the new people don't quite understand what you're saying. So that's really funny that the problem can grow to even your fans and your loyal customers.
100%.
So yeah, you talk about speaking to customers, understanding prospects. How do you go about research, the main research or other kind of inputs that you pull into to guide your messaging strategy?
Yeah, there's a couple different inputs. The one that has been consistent my entire time at Intercom is leveraging our existing customers. That's usually hopefully this doesn't sound crass, but it's the cheapest and fastest way to get feedback.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where historically we've always leaned into that. What's kind of layered on top of that is, okay, well, let's actually take this and test it with prospects. And now it's much more affordable and accessible as well, with lots of different software out there. But there was a little bit more of a resistance in the early days because the feeling of like, oh, this is going to slow things down, or, oh, do we really want to spend money here? This is definitely become a bigger part of the input into how we test things and how we produce things. I think the other side is also just looking at the general marketplace, competitors, how do they talk? Looking at, things like G2 Crowd and different areas like that, looking at analysts and how they talk about our category and using all of that as influence into how we position a message.
Yeah, just so many inputs. A lot of product marketing and positioning and messaging is like piecing together the pieces of the puzzle to make it fit.
And then like massaging it and making it your own, right?
Yes, exactly. Right. It's definitely an art. So, have you had any sort of specific challenges around messaging at Intercom, whether it's complexity or products, anything? Has there been any kind of specific messaging challenges you've faced recently?
Yeah, definitely. I think the one common challenge that we face, hopefully I'm not giving away any secrets here, but actually I've heard this through a lot of different companies face a similar challenge as well. When you kind of grow and you start to offer multiple products or solutions, it's hard to find that identity. Like, okay, who are we? If you were to say you are this one thing, or what's our one sentence pitch, it's really hard to align on that. You don't want to be put into a box. We don't want to be just a support tool or just a marketing tool. We want to be a platform or something. And when you elevate it that way, it sometimes just becomes very weak and soft and people don't know what you actually do.
I think that's a challenge that so many companies face. I mean, of course, I can see Intercom facing that. How do you find that umbrella statement that is, exciting, is clear, holds everything beneath it, makes sense? Do you have any tips about what to think through when you're trying to come up with that one huge, one liner, that vision, that statement? I mean, any tips there?
Yeah, we've done whole projects dedicated to this over the last few years, especially. And there's all these different pieces that kind of feed into it. We called it the Intercom Story Project a couple of years ago when we had launched it. And it was like, let's look at how we tell our story today, internally, even, how's everybody telling that Intercom story? If you asked internally employees, what does Intercom do? What are they saying? And then we kind of took that same approach externally to our customers, to our prospects, and, tried to kind of marry all these and create a very succinct Intercom story. And then when we got to that piece, which took a while, right? You're kind of like taking a story that already exists and massaging it a little bit. I think then we had to, which was more of a challenge because this is, you can imagine the time constraints and the resourcing problem, that you have to take also your vision where you want to be and also draw the line between the two. And that usually has to come from the executive team. There's also a lot of challenges there too. We don't want to box ourselves in too much. We want to have freedom to be many things in the future. And so, there's a lot of work done in that area. And then what we've done is just continue to test it, continue to kind of put it in front of people, checking if this actually makes sense. It's honestly, this is probably one of those projects that's going to continue to evolve over time.
Right. Yes. As a company evolves, the story, the positioning, the messaging evolves too. Well, you're doing a great job because the messaging is great. And I know a lot of people really like it. I'd say you've done a really great job. Thank you so much for sharing behind the curtains some of the tips and techniques you do over at Intercom. Okay, Christine. So I need to know, if you could banish one word from product marketing for all of eternity, what would it be?
I kind of hinted to this earlier, but really, the word platform for me is so hollow. And honestly, we're guilty of using it ourselves and it's sometimes impossible, but it just means so many different things that it ends up meaning nothing. And that's a bit of a challenge. I'll just sneak one other one in there. And again, we use this, so don't be mad at me. But accelerate, I feel like you see accelerate everywhere.
Yes.
It's just not a word I use in my day-to-day life. I'm never saying accelerate. So,
I remember doing a findings presentation with a client, and I was talking about overused terms in the sales technology space. And accelerate was one of them. And I called it acceleratorama. Like, just everyone says it. And to this day, they bring it up. I still say acceleratorama. It's just so much of it. But platform also, I am so behind you there on platform. So it's really good ones. Well, it's been a pleasure chatting with you. Thank you so much for your thoughtful answers.
Perfect. Cool. Yeah. Thanks, Emma. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for being on, and enjoy the rest of your week.
You too.
All right. See you.
Bye now.